Here with us today is Jenny, founder of the Starseed Academy. We're happy to have you on our show today, Jenny. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
And let's jump right in. First of all, please explain to us, what is the Starseed Academy and what is your mission?
Absolutely. So the first question is really, what is a starseed then? And that's what people really don't quite understand. Because if I'm being completely honest, I think everyone is a starseed. But the difference would then be, what's an awakened starseed? Because I have never had a client come to me where I have not seen a lifetime off Earth. And a starseed is just a soul that's had lifetimes off world, right? Like lifetimes in either our Milky Way galaxy or potentially other galaxies, even universes. And so an awakened starseed is just then somebody that either remembers that having these lifetimes, they really have a lot of memories maybe coming through their dreams, or they've had a past life regression and they've got these personal memories of living lifetime as what we would call aliens, but really it's just off-world beings, right? And so that's what a starseed is. And I've never met, I've done like hundreds and hundreds of readings and different things throughout my career, and I've never seen anybody not have one. You don't just start on Earth. There's quite a progression that happens with the soul journey. So I would say that we are all multidimensional. And that's a really good way of calling it too, just multidimensional. And on top of that, if you know about time not being like past and present, and that everything is happening simultaneously, and they've proven that time is kind of just this man-made concept, then the truth is that we're actually living these parallel lives, not past lives. It's more parallel lifetimes. And so you could be living now, Daniel, here on Earth, and you could also be living in the Pleiades, and you could also be living, in the Grand Central Sun, which is like the hub of the universe, parallel universes, multiple Earth timelines. It's so confusing for our human minds to understand, but it's something that people describe and experience when they have these glimpses of enlightenment, which you can receive through Kundalini awakening. And there's a lot of ways that you can kind of like raise your consciousness above this Earth, conscious level, and kind of see like this larger picture. So there's a lot of signs to being, an activated or an awakened starseed. So when I was a child, I had a lot of what I would call gifts poking through. Now, everybody has these gifts. I'm not saying that, starseeds are special. Everybody has the ability, but in a starseed, it's like a lot more awakened, active, online, and it becomes really obvious. And so for me, as a child, some examples would be like, being able to hear beyond my own world. That sounds totally crazy, but like I would hear music, I would hear voices, I would hear like literally between the cracks in the worlds. And I was experiencing what people call the clairs. So there is clairvoyance. So that's the ability to see beyond this realm, and that's in the third eye. There's clairaudience, which was what was happening to me, which is the ability to hear beyond your own world. There is clairsentience, which is, these are all French words. So clear feeling, which is the ability to feel. That's what people call themselves, empaths. You just are feeling what everyone else is feeling. You feel their emotions, you know what's going on with them, you can tell their mood. And then the ultimate is claircognizance. And that's when people say, oh, I'm getting a download. That literally comes down through the crown chakra as this download, like information. You don't maybe even know where it came from. You just can know things. And so these clairs, the language of the clairs, it truly is like learning languages. And starseed children that are active, in their gifts, will all of a sudden just have one or more of these clairs just pop online. And it definitely freaked out my parents, like especially my mom, who I was really close to. Like, she would, for instance, she would find me in the middle of the night, and I'm like young, like maybe 5 years old, and I'm sitting in a living room that's totally pitch black on the couch having a complete conversation with somebody that is invisible to her, that she can't see, but to me, this was my friend. And I remember it so clear to this day. I had this imaginary friend called Star Child, which is hilarious now. And she was this little female girl, a little bit older than me. And as I grew up, she was always just a little bit older than me, kind of like a best friend or a big sister, really prominent in my life, like loud, visible, like there with me, like very, very real for me. And it was what I would say about that is like children are very connected to these other realms. Like they're animals, especially cats and children, they're all so sensitive to being able to see beyond our realms. You know, they perceive of things that we can't perceive of a lot of the time. So as a kid, I was like really, really hyper aware of all of this. And I was doing things like channeling, which is, if you don't know what channeling is, that's where you're using the language of the clairs to communicate with these beings, to talk to them, to communicate with them, to receive information. I was doing channeling and I didn't know what it was. And I was meeting my spirit team. Right. So this is another concept. Like I have, like I said, I've done like I've had so many clients over the years, and every single one has a spirit team. I've never seen somebody not have spirit guides, right? And so this can be made up of galactic beings, like extraterrestrials, aliens, what we would call that, as well as angels, which, I mean, technically you could argue that that would also be an alien. It's a being on another, you know, realm or world, ascended masters, ancestors, even animal guides coming through for people all the time, right? So there's just so many people on your spirit team that you can communicate with, and that I was without even realizing what I was doing. So as I was getting older and I started really looking into what is this that I'm experiencing? And I was doing all the research that I could, you know, pulling up words like I had had a Kundalini experience, which really rocked my world. So pulling up what is enlightenment. I had a near-death experience, which really changed a lot for me. So I went down this rabbit hole of NDEs, enlightenment, aliens, star seeds. What is happening to me? What is going on? And when I got like a good amount of what I felt was answers and confirm them with my own experiences, I started my YouTube channel. And I was like, okay, people need to know about this. People need to, they're probably feeling like I was, super alone, super like weird and different, and like no one speaks your language. And that's the worst feeling ever. Like your own family, your own friends, no one speaks your language. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to just do this thing, and I'm just going to start talking about this stuff online. And this was way before it was cute, like way before it was trendy or cute to be talking about Starseed. The pushback that I got from the like people, was just insane. People calling me crazy and all of these things because they really didn't understand anything about clairs or psychic gifts or spirit guides. And it's normal if you've never had an experience to be a complete skeptic, but then you can take a full skeptic and give them a reading, which I love doing, and totally blow their minds with like, you couldn't have known all of that. Who are you talking to? Like, what is going on at your end? Like, it's a beautiful thing to like open someone's mind like that. So yeah, like started my YouTube channel, started to create this really beautiful community, started having people confirm for me now, saying, oh, wait, that happened to me. I know what you're talking about, and sharing their own stuff. And then they started asking me, like, can you do a reading for me? Can you do healings for me? And eventually it turned into like a membership group, which I now have. And, you know, teaching people how to really use their clairs. Like, I've got this really beautiful program called Psychic Light where I do exactly that. I teach people how to speak the language of the clairs, because everyone has access to it, especially once we like connect them to the pineal gland, which is actually the hub of the psychic center. So like kind of said before, where each of those clairs, they're all situated in chakras. If you connect all of that to your pineal gland, that's the brain's way of interpreting what psychic gifts are. So it's your way of really learning how to use your human brain to now interpret, what am I receiving? What am I seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing? So I do that with people. And I also teach them to do clean and ethical channeling. There's an awful lot of people out there that say they're channelers, and it's just so filled with ego. And it can really be harmful because it's filled with like separation or division, and it can really hurt what I consider what's the most important is oneness and unity. And beyond teaching that, I also teach astral travel, which is really cool as well. So, and in all these programs, we work with galactic beings. We work with higher dimensional beings like, yeah, the ascended masters and the archangels, but also galactic councils of light. So I've worked with the Venusians, I've worked with the Pleiadians, Andromedans. Mantis beings are amazing. The Lyrans are really, really fierce and beautiful. And also the Orion Council of Light. And like so many, I usually stay within the Milky Way, but beyond that, I take my membership group. We astral travel to all of these places, and we get these guided tours of their worlds. Which sounds crazy, but is so, like, astral travel is so underrated. It's so powerful. And we get guidance from them as well. We call them in to visit us, guidance for what it's like to be on Earth right now. They offer us really beautiful healings and activations. There are so many benevolent interdimensional galactic beings out there that are so interested in humanity and really, really want to work with us and help us with this. So, I mean, that's a little bit of a rundown of how I got started. I mean, and
Wow.
how I've kind of just taken that and created like a really beautiful community around it.
Awesome.
Wow.
Wow,
Mhm.
that's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff that
That's-
I don't understand. But that's why we're here for. When people ask you if you could do a reading for them,
Mhm.
what does that mean? What exactly is a reading?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my specialty is speaking to somebody's spirit team. So I get somebody on Zoom with me and I say, okay, we're going to set up a sacred space to make sure that what comes through is in the light and divinely true, so that it's not just anyone can connect with you. So we set up sacred space with the white light, and then I speak to their team. So I have a couple different readings. They can choose to meet their guides. They can choose to look into their Akashic records and see their lifetimes around the universe, or they can choose what's called a breakthrough reading, which is like the most popular. It's a Q&A session with your team. So if you've ever wanted to ask your guides anything, and people ask all kinds of different questions. They ask about their pets, they ask about their health, their career advice, their relationships, everything. Nothing is off limits. And what I do is I literally act like this tool in between, this communication tool in between. And I tell them everything that their guides, like what they look like, what they say, what they're doing as they say it. I never hold anything back, even when a guide is, sometimes they can be a little blunt, a little bit, like to the point. And I just warn them, beforehand. So different guides have different personalities. It's a really interesting thing that people don't understand, is that these are just people, just like us. They're just not living on Earth right now. They have personalities. They're hilarious, like senses of humor that are so funny. They can be rude, blunt, condescending. Grays, like gray beings especially, are super condescending. And I feel like they're not trying to be rude, but they always are. And it's so funny to me now. Like they just all have their own personalities. And to introduce someone to their team is like life-changing. And then to even teach them how to communicate with them on their own is, again, just taking that next step.
Interesting. Can you tell us more about those memories of past lives or life on other planets that you talked about before? What do people remember?
Oh gosh, I had somebody, it's such a beautiful experience. Someone came to me for help with their business. So I do a lot of like spiritual business mentoring. And they came to me for help with their business. They knew that they were a healer, but they felt like they weren't clicking with what is that. I feel this fire in me to heal people. I've taken Reiki, I've done these things, but it's not quite it. And I said, okay, let's find out. And so we sit down, and as soon as I sit down with this man, this client, the Arcturian Council of Light steps in. Like at least 5 or 6 of them. They just step forward into the space like that I'm in, and they start speaking to tell me what to tell him, basically, right? And they share with him that he was an Arcturian soul, which means that he just has had quite a few lifetimes there. So he has a higher Arcturian, almost like DNA, soul DNA count, if that makes sense, in his system, where he really resonates with that frequency. And so as an Arcturian healer, there's a specific way for him to heal that is not being taught here yet on Earth. So he can't just go take a course and learn it. It's something that he has to kind of actually be the leader of, develop this, start using it, and then maybe down the line start teaching people how to do it. They showed him exactly what to do. It was, having your person that you're working on, the person you're healing, lay down, and then using his palm chakras, you have chakras in the palms of your hand, to pull up like a DNA blueprint, like a hologram that hovers above the person's body. And then he would actually work on the hologram itself, not on the physical human. He pulls it up, works on the hologram, he removes blockages, reconnects things, and he's able to like see where it's flowing, where it's blocked, where it's ready to be upgraded, all kinds of things. So they show this to us. And then when you're done doing all the work that you're going to do in the hologram, you like push it back down into the body and it goes all the way back in. And then there's like an integration process of probably about a week for that person as this new, like almost like it's like a blueprint. It looks like a soul blueprint, goes back in and it starts to make physical changes in the body as well. So now he's taken this as this Arcturian healing and really taken that and run with it and create such a beautiful like business, services, healings around. And he's going further. Like I could only tell him that, but in his soul, when I shared this information with him, it was like a light bulb went off. He actually started to cry. Like he started crying because it felt like this memory being unlocked. And these people, he's like, I know them. Like it just felt like it's a soul resonance and a depth that can't be explained, the emotion that it brings through, right? And so he's taken that and gone really deep and far into it. And I see him really thriving in what he's doing. That's just one example of, you just never know who's going to show up in a reading. Like it's so spontaneous. I just never know what's going to happen. And it's really, really cool. So, I mean, other people have had like witch wounds that need healing. So they will receive, you know, visions of lifetimes where they were burned at the stake and all of these things. And that's why they're holding back now from using their gifts. And so we go in and we do clearings and healings on this. And then they go off and also are able to step into their power. So whatever it is, your guides know. And your spirit guides, they know you better than you think. And they will bring up stuff that is so funny. And so like, how could you know that moment? You know, where people are like, they say to me all the time, whoa, like you're the real deal. Like I just, until you sit down and actually have a reading, it's all just words. But when it happens to you personally, it is like life-changing.
To me, as a interested but rather skeptical person, all of that sounds very esoteric or science fiction-esque, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But I get you. I think you get that a lot.
I sure do. Yeah.
Yeah. But don't mind me saying that. I'm
Of course not. Of course not. It's kind of like I said at the beginning, until you have your own experience with it, it's really hard to comprehend that you are surrounded all the time with these guides and that they love you and that they know you so well and that they've probably been with you since childhood. And it feels like meeting them is like meeting family. And they are your family, actually. I've actually never, you know, every spirit guide that somebody talks to, they're either friend or family from another life. They've got amazing connections with them where they were their mother or vice versa. Like it's just crazy how tangled it is. And that's a soul family, right? So a soul family is somebody that incarnates together, like a bunch of souls all coming to earth at the same time. You incarnate over and over again, and your soul family is your closest friends, your closest family, your spirit guides. So it's the people that know you the best, definitely. So, I mean, yes, I've had all of this esoteric, as you want to call it, or kind of like non-physical experiences, but I've definitely had a lot of what you'd like to talk about on this channel, like physical, like experiences in the real world, such as visitations, the NDE that happened to me, and also abductions that have happened as well, that have just deepened my beliefs in everything that I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Dustin and I, we are nuts and bolts guys. So
yes.
Sometimes stuff like that is a little bit hard to swallow for us, but it's very interesting.
It is, yeah.
It's very interesting. Can we talk about your near-death experience, or you don't
Yeah,
want
absolutely. Yeah. So my near-death experience was, I mean, very similar to, I mean, I feel like everyone that has them, because I've researched them so much, there's always these same components. So for me, I was really, really sick with like pneumonia and like lung infection. And I was living alone at the time, and I was laying on my couch, and I was laying on my back, like face up, which was probably not good for what I was suffering with. And I kind of passed out, and I was a lot sicker than I realized. And then I started to, it's very strange when this happens. You almost don't have like a moment where you realize it happens. All of a sudden, I was just outside of my body, and I was hearing this this like moaning sound, and I was kind of, it sounded like a sick animal, like whoa, this horrible moaning, and it was actually my human body doing that sound. And I remember looking down at my body, and then being like, whoa, then where am I? And I had floated all the way up to the ceiling, and I could feel it behind me, and I wasn't really sure how to like maneuver, you know, like to fly or whatever. I was just kind of like pinned in the corner of the ceiling, and it was really scary. And then when I looked over in my apartment that I was in, there was these cookie cutter figures of three men, exactly the same, three in a row. So like they look like men with almost like suits on. And I could just see that they were like a black silhouette because there was this bright light behind them. So there was three in a row, like you would make, like a kid makes like cookie cutter, you know what I mean? Like the people
Sure.
that are exactly the same
Yep.
holding hands. And it looked just like that, three in a row across this light. And I saw them there and I was like, oh, and I felt like I didn't actually feel afraid. I remember feeling like I should offer them something like tea. Like, I don't know why that was the first thought I had. I was like, oh, like visitors, like, should I offer them tea? What should can I get anything for you? Like, what can I do? And as soon as I noticed them, the next thing I noticed was the light behind them. And then I couldn't think of anything else. And I started trying to like look around them to see the light behind them. And when I looked at the light, I started immediately floating towards it, whereas I had been pinned before, kind of in the corner of the ceiling. So I started floating towards the light, and I was planning on kind of going around them. And all of a sudden, the sound, it was like a lightning crack. It was so like a thunder. It was like, no, all of a sudden, all three of them just bellowed at once, no. And I was like, and I like kind of went back a little ways, floated backwards. And I was like, whoa, like, what do you mean? Like I thought I had done something wrong. They just said no. And then I was like pushed away from the light. And then I woke up in my body. In my body, I was not in a good state at all. I felt like I couldn't open my eyes, and I was like feeling all of this fluid in my throat and in my lungs, like I couldn't breathe. And I heard one of my guides that I know is a Pleiadian guide, who's the one that was Star Child that I described at the beginning from my childhood. My main guide say to me, Jenny, get up off the couch, get up and go to bed, because she knew I couldn't stay on my back or I was going to fully die. And she just kept saying, get up, get up. And I was like, oh, like, I can't, I feel so weak. And she was like yelling, and she just kept saying, get up, get up. And I fell onto my hands and knees and like crawled across the floor of the living room to my bedroom and like just collapsed on my stomach. And I woke up hours and hours later, like maybe a whole day later, it felt like. And it felt like, whoa, like I remembered it so clearly. I was like, did that really happen? Like, that is insane. After something like that, you feel so different inside after an NDE. There is something that changes. I felt so like, once I got better, I felt so filled with this new passion for my mission. And like I was this was before I started the YouTube channel. This was before anything. And I was like, okay, I have to do this. There's a reason that it wasn't my time. I know that I have a mission for being here. Like, I'm absolutely going to do this thing. And that was really kind of what fueled a lot of the fire behind it, was that whole experience and seeing that the soul is eternal. It doesn't die when we die. There's something afterwards. And there was somebody telling me, no, stay, you have more to do here. So that was my near-death experience, which I think is amazing to read, that so many people have that, like almost exactly to the T, like the people in front of the light that won't let you go, and encouraging you to like get out of the situation that you're in so that you don't die, like really, really crazy like that. So yeah, that was definitely something that I'll never forget.
Yeah, what an experience.
Yeah, with the life death situation, that was pretty insane. I heard other people claim the same thing with even with the light draws them to the light almost. No, again, the whole situation is very interesting. The fact that I heard that same story too. Have you had any physical contact with ETs?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had one visitation I've had a few visitations, but one really stands out as being like the most physical, if you know what I mean. And then I've had a couple of abductions as well that were very, very real. The visitation that I had was pretty positive. So some of the other stuff's a little negative, but the visitation was really positive. I had like this, it It was very shortly after the NDE in that same apartment. A lot happened in this apartment. I was only there for a year. I had a Kundalini awakening, a visitation, this near-death experience. It was like this really strange time in my life where everything was just kind of turning on its head. I remember the visitation really, really clearly though. So I didn't know now what I know now. I can now say this was an Andromedan being. I had no idea at the time what she was. I knew it was female, I could tell, but other than that, I can just describe what it looked like, but I had no idea what it was, who she was, anything. So I was laying in my bed, and it was in those, like when you're just waking up, that feeling of that, oh, you're just kind of waking up. And I kind of like looked at my doorway of my room, and this being was like, if the door was here, she like peeked around and then went back away. And I was like, what the hell was that? Because it was this really, really strange, like, so this being has no hair. And their skin is super, super pale purple, like really pale lavender, grayish purple color. And there's like this heart-shaped face that kind of like is a pointy little chin and then goes up. And these black eyes that are like almond shaped, they kind of go back almost exotically, like almond shaped. And there's nothing but just black. It's just all black. Wow. And a very small, flattish kind of nose and smaller mouth, like not really, it's more the eyes were really like noticeable. And so this being like, is very tall because she was like at the top of the door, like super, super tall, right? So she peeks around and then goes away. And I could tell that she was still there. You can just feel when something is still there. So I spoke to her, and I do this with everything, you know, every experience like this, I really find if you have something like this happen to you, actually try to communicate with them, and that it will let them know that you're interested in having an experience and that you're not terrified and all the things. So I actually said out loud, I see you, like, I know you're there. Who are you? Like, what are you doing here? And she did another little like peek around the door and then away again. And I could tell that she was not aggressive, obviously, from her behavior. She was being like, I'm here. I don't want to freak you out, but I can't leave. Like, obviously, there's a reason that she's here. And she's being like very almost timid in a way, which I probably needed because I hadn't had anything like this happen before, and I probably would have been super freaked out. And so for me, I work with Archangel Michael to make me feel safe and to protect me in a lot of these cases. So I called on Archangel Michael and I just said, okay, somebody's visiting. Just make sure, like, vet them and make sure this is all good. And I felt like I was getting a go ahead. So I was like, okay, well, I know you're there. Like, you might as well come in. And then when she spoke to me, it wasn't like she was speaking out loud. This is maybe some of my first, like, really strong telepathic feelings as well. It's like she sent her voice into my mind, and she said, and it was loud, and she said, I'm afraid I'll frighten you. And I was like, oh, okay, well, why are you here? And she says, I have something to give you, but I'm afraid I'm going to frighten you. And I was like, well, maybe when you come in, just stay back, like stay there at the back of the room. Don't come towards me. And so she said, okay, I'm coming. Like somebody really nice would say, like, come in, like wasn't aggressive at all. And she shuffled into the room super slowly, and she almost was like awkward about it. She was like holding her arms, like trying not to look scary, and was standing like way at the end of my bed and was just like hanging out way back there. And I was like, ooh, my heart, like, it's so normal, like so afraid, right? Like my heart started going, and she was just kind of like not looking directly at me to not scare me. Like she was being so gentle. And so that almost made me like it was kind of humorous in a way. Like I can find a lot of like humor in a lot of these things. So I was kind of like, well, this is funny that she's all like, oh, I won't look at you. Like, I'm not gonna like I'll just stand here for a second till you get used to it. And so I said, okay, well, like, what are you here to give me? And she said, can I come a little closer? And I was like, I don't know. Like I wasn't ready for that yet. And she's like, okay. And we waited it out, like a little bit of a like showdown. And then eventually I said, okay, what do you need me to do? And she said, just put out your hand. And so I put out my hand like towards her. I was still laying down, like I didn't sit up or anything. I just laid there. I was kind of frozen. And I put my hand out like over the side of my bed, kind of just hanging in the air. And she said, can I come towards your hand? And she came up towards my hand. And when she took my hand in hers, her skin was cold. Like it was different than mine. Like it was definitely cooler. And her fingers were really, really long. Like everything about her was very like lanky. Like she had a really long neck, really, really long arms, like very long and lanky, and she did have clothes on. Like she had on some kind of dress or something. It wasn't like I was really taking in all of that details because I couldn't stop looking at her face, but I saw that she had on like a long dress of some kind. So she wasn't just like what we see gray beings. Like she was
Sure.
civilized, if that makes sense. Like she had
Right.
like she looked nice. And so she touched my hand and she did something to like a pinprick on each finger. And then I just knew to hand her the other hand, and she did one pinprick. So 10 pinpricks on each finger. And I was just looking at my hands, and she slowly started to back away. And she said, "It's all in your hands now." And then she just left. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? Like, it's all in my hands now? Like, it was so mysterious because that could mean so many things. Like, it's very symbolic. It's like, oh, well, it's in your hands to do something with this, but it's also physically in my hands because she just did something to my hands. And after she did that, like maybe within a couple of months, maybe 2 or 3 months, I ended up being really inspired to take an energy healing course and to like use my hands and activate my hands to do like advanced Reiki. And so I always remember her starting that out for me and like creating like the energy of that first. And then I went and got even more training in that. And you know, just like I was sharing with the Arcturian healer, I found that I have a way of healing that is not, no one is teaching it here on this earth. And I think that she gave me that almost like a remembrance of my gifts in my hands for healing. And so my kind of healing that I do now looks nothing like Reiki. It looks nothing like anything else out there. And I think that that really felt like the beginning of it. I've since talked to her. I have not seen her physically since that. That was like the one time that was like super physical, but I've since channeled her as like one of my guides. And she told me that that she is an Andromedan and that she is one of the main guides on my team, like the healer guide, and that her name is Lily, or that I can call her Lily because her name in her language is not something that I can say. And so I've been calling her Lily, and she's been there. And every time I need a healing, I ask for her help, and it's just this really beautiful relationship now with her.
Wow, that's super interesting. And do you know much about the reptilians at all? So I think we watched a little bit of a video of a clip of what you're talking about, the reptilians.
Draconians.
Or Draconians, I'm sorry.
Draconians, yeah. Yeah, there's lots of different kinds of reptilians within the Draco constellation. Yeah, I definitely have had lots of experiences with them. Some of them not so positive. I received a warning from one of them. That was one of the very real visitations that I had. I've had a lot of experiences with them, actually. So the thing about the reptilians or the draconians is that everybody assumes that they're all negative, like it's a stereotype. So you could say, you could say, well, are all humans negative? No, but a large group of them are. Like many of them can be quite evil, but not all humans are. It's the same thing with draconians and reptilians and all of that. It really is about the soul within. They're not all evil. They're not all bad. Are a lot of them? Yeah, a lot of them are quite selfish, service to self, and they're mixed up in a lot of dark things. But there are other ones, like there is the Reptilian Council of Light. Like there are good ones as well. And so that's just something that I would want to preface it with, is that they're not all bad, if that makes sense. Sure. But yes, I've had some, what I would call like negative experiences. So I was planning on doing an astral mission to Inner Earth with my membership group, where we were going to go to Inner Earth, where a lot of reptilian activity is like kind of a hotspot for it. And we were going to go there, and we were going to kind of like blast the AI matrix system that runs the simulation that is this world. We were going to blast it with a lot of light, and we were going to do everything that we could to really kind of bring more love and light into the collective consciousness of humanity through this grid. And it's basically like an AI grid around the planet. So every planet has their own planetary grid, which is organic, which is a little further out. But then inside of that, they had created this one that was all AI. And that's what they were using to like kind of like pump fear frequency into the collective to create like the world that they wanted. I mean, that's a really deep thing that we could go on forever about. But anyway, the point was that we were going to go do work on it that was in the light. And so I had been talking about it, not really thinking that I should kind of keep it hush hush. I was talking about it online. I was talking about it in my membership. I was like blasting it as in trying to get people to join this event. And I actually got a reptilian showing up and warning me not to do it. So in like a very aggressive way, like I was sitting in my desk, like I was in my office, I was sitting in my chair, and there was no desk in front of me. I was kind of turned to the side, and I was doing this meditation, and I was asking, I can't remember what I was doing, but I was meditating about something. And then when I opened my eyes, there was a reptilian sitting like directly across from me, like very, very close to me in a chair that like I don't have. So somehow they were sitting in a chair that actually wasn't there. So somehow like bringing their world into mine in a way, like merging worlds. So that really makes me see the power of astral travel too, because they know how to do it too. And so if they're sitting in a chair and I'm sitting in a chair and they bring themselves into my realm or into my frequency, they can arrive in your space, right? If it's not protected. And so anyway, they were there instantly. And this one looked like a velociraptor. So like the kind of like shorter snout, really scary teeth, full on like velociraptor, thick tail, like the hands that look like that. Like some of them look different. There are bigger ones that look like, a lot of them look like dragons, Tyrannosaurus Rexes, very like reptilian dragon kind of stuff. But this one was smaller, like a human size, and it looked like a velociraptor. It was bigger than me, but still smaller from the ones that I've seen. Anyway, it had on like military style garb, which again, seeing them in clothing can be a little bit weird, but it had on like military style clothing. And it was sitting in this chair, and it kind of like leaned in towards me to be very intimidating. And it said, like it said quite a few things, but it said like, absolutely do not go to Inner Earth. You are not welcome there. If you go there, there's going to be problems for you. And it was kind of short and like a little growl at the end, and then it just disappeared. But of course, I just cleared my space and set up protective wards, and I absolutely did go to Inner Earth anyway, even though with that warning. And we did like an incredible event there where we created a lot of shifting for the collective consciousness. And we saw a lot of things in the news afterwards showing that we had made shifts in a lot of the stuff that was going on with like the corruption around COVID at the time. And so, yeah, that was just one of the examples of like that they do know what we're up to. Some of us are, being monitored, and they can come and try to scare you, warn you, and kind of like try to put you off your path.
Interesting.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to channeling for a second. And I hope you don't mind me being all over the place with my questions here, but you have so many interesting stuff. What exactly happens when you are channeling? So maybe guide me through the process a little bit.
Yeah, so channeling is what I told you before, where I connect to the person's team, right? You can connect to anyone. So if I'm just connecting for myself to, for instance, I want to write a really beautiful video lesson, and I'm going to put it on YouTube. I can connect to anything that I want to, God source, angelic realm, Pleiadians, Lyrans, whomever I want. I just call them in and I tell them what I need. Okay, I'm creating this video. What does a guided message or something for the collective? What do people need the most right now? And then I use my clairs to tune in. So your clairs are the in-between between the spirit realm and yourself, or it's not even the spirit realm, it's these galactic realms, but anything off world, anything off Earth. So like I said, it's clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, and claircognizance. So these are what psychic gifts are based on, the clairs. And you just tune in, which is basically you can close your eyes and you can just like take a couple of deep breaths, and then you start to telepathically receive through claircognizance information and downloads that wants to come through. Some people like to do it through automatic writing. Other people just receive it and write it down afterwards, but you're basically going to see visions. You're going to hear words. You're going to feel the feelings and the intentions behind it. And you're going to receive like the claircognizant downloads through that. So it's using your clairs to communicate with off-world beings, and then making that physical here in this world by doing something with it, creating something out of it.
Can you choose whom you get in contact with?
Of course. Yes. Yep. You call them in. People's names are powerful, right? You can call anybody into your space, as long as you're working with a quiet mind. The biggest block for people is most people have like racing thoughts and busy minds, and it's extremely difficult to receive anything else when your mind is full, or for you to notice what you're receiving because you're all over over the place. So that's people's biggest struggle. And I do help people to like kind of like create that stillness within, so that you can, what does your own energy feel like, so that you can know what something else is if it's entering in and it's not you, right?
Can you only channel, let's call it beings, or can you channel like places too?
You can read the energy of a place. If you know, if it has a soul, then you can channel its, like it can talk to you, right? It has to be a sentient being. So for instance, Gaia is like the soul that is Mother Earth. So you can channel the earth. She is real. She has a personality. You can talk to her. But like, you know, if you're trying to channel, I don't know, like a flower, it might be more difficult. You might just feel like, okay, it feels, the energy that's coming off, it feels like this, but you might not get words. It might not be intelligent enough to send you anything, you know.
What about the sun or the moon or Venus or?
The moon is not the moon that we currently have. I've done a couple of videos on this. It's not like an organic thing anymore. It's definitely been replaced. So what I did was channel information about the moon from the Galactic Federation of Light or the Council for Humanity. There's a couple of higher councils that run the Milky Way, and you can channel like Earth history, human history, history of the moon, the sun, anything, and they can really help you to understand kind of what's going on.
We just recently watched a video of yours on your channel. We talked about the Nephilim. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
The Nephilim? Yeah, absolutely. So the Nephilim were basically like giants, right? When we see like the fairy tales of giants and people find these skeletons and skulls of these human, like giant beings. So the Nephilim were, you know, like basically like a hybrid between humans and these other beings. And some people think that it was fallen angels. Some people think that they were galactic beings. I think that it could be a combination of different kinds of beings. And we've actually seen that same thing in ancient Egypt. So in ancient Egypt, that was like a really hot spot time on Earth for galactic visitations. And at that time, you're seeing in Egyptian artwork, if you look at it, you don't have to look closely, it's so obvious. They show like avian beings, like bird-headed humanoids. They show reptilians. They show all kinds of things. And then they show like the human women, and then they show like the children of them. So there was definitely like interdimensional breeding that was going on at different times on the earth. And I mean, sometimes that resulted in something strong, and sometimes that resulted in something, you know, not even usable. And so there's all kinds of time periods throughout Earth where this was going on. And yeah, I think it's really super interesting. And I see that there's, you know, you can kind of like link up scientific or geologists that are finding these skeletons and these fossils and stuff like that to kind of prove it. But there's just so much more to our human history than they share, right? And that is everything. You know, I think that they when I say they, I mean like the governments and the people that released information, they hold so much back around disclosure, around our history, around how ancient civilizations could possibly be more advanced than we are now. Like there's just so much that's being held back with that. So I like to cover a lot of that kind of stuff on my channel, and I take video requests as well. And I generally will channel that information, and then sometimes I'll back it up with some research, or I'll just put out the channeled message and I'll have lots of people messaging me, like with the moon video, how I channeled that we used to have 2 moons, and I never heard that before. But the information that came through is that we had twin moons here on Earth, and that there was like some kind of collision that happened where we lost one. I mean, that was just pure channeling. I've never looked into that. And then someone went and researched and started sending me all these articles proving that that was true, and that that was actually something that they talk about all the time. So it's really exciting when that kind of like stuff can be confirmed. Now, of course, like not everything can be confirmed, and that's why we have a lot of skeptic people, but that's okay. Like everybody's at a different level of consciousness, and everybody's ready for different information. And sometimes it's hard to kind of get out of the 3D, the things that you can touch with your hands and see with your eyes, and to believe beyond that. But I mean, I definitely have like experienced a lot of the like physical touch stuff, like when it comes to abductions, which we haven't talked about yet, but that is something that's happened to me. I know it's happened to a lot of people. And it's like, how could so many people have the same kinds of stories and it not be true? It's just like with the NDEs, like how can we all say the same thing? Like somebody's got to start giving some credit to that, to people, just their own experiences being the proof, and that we don't need more proof than what we are sharing. But with the abductions, most abductions actually have a higher purpose and are built into our soul contracts, or contracts that we've made in other lifetimes, that we would agree to be a part of certain programs. And that could be observing DNA evolution within your body, and they're continuing to pull you up to read that, and it could also be that they are benevolent beings and they're doing healings and activations on you. And then there's also a program that's a lot bigger than most people realize, and that is the hybridization programs. There's multiple species that are creating hybridization species with humans mixed with something else, right? So the one that people talk about the most is the Greys, but it's definitely not the only one that's happening with. And so, like I said, most abductions can be kind of positive, even though in the moment they might feel scary. They can actually have a larger purpose than you realize, and that it's something that you've agreed to, and you may not have the memory of it, but that you've actually agreed to it. But I will agree that it's not all love and light out there. Like, I'm not naive to the fact that we live in a multidimensional universe, and there's benevolent, loving beings, but there's also these other beings that are, maybe in the middle, like neutral. And then there's even the darker beings that would be happy to, create trouble, siphon your energy, use it to feed themselves, use you for whatever purpose they want. If we live in a multi-dimensional universe, there has to be light, dark, and everything in the middle. And so I did have what I perceived to be like a negative abduction. Now, because I like to be positive, it's possible I just can't see the larger purpose yet. But to be honest, it felt like a mistake somehow, like it wasn't supposed to happen. It's been years and I still can't see anything necessarily positive that had happened from that. And so, so that's something that is pretty confusing when it happens to you and you're trying to put a greater meaning to it, and maybe you can't always do that. So.
Sure.
I've noticed that on your channel, you're talking about portals and vortexes. And when Dustin and I talk about these kind of things, we think about mysterious places, forgotten knowledge, and all that kind of stuff. Stonehenge is sometimes described as a portal, and there's many more mysterious places on Earth which are described as portals. What is your interpretation of vortexes or portals?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're two different things. So a vortex is a power place. So a power place is where things get amplified. So that would be like where the ley lines cross, maybe multiple times, because there's so many ley lines, right? Where ley lines cross, they build these sacred sites because they act like an amplifier to the energy that you bring there. And so things like the pyramids and Stonehenge, what you were talking about, and like different sacred sites around the world are intentionally placed on these power sites. So that way, when they go to do their rituals or their magic or whatever reason they were built for, it's powered that much of a degree higher. And so portals would be something like that you maybe would consider to be a wormhole, or like a black hole that goes from one place to the other. To create that, I don't know that I believe humans have the ability to do that. I do believe that interdimensional beings have the ability to do that. They can call them stargates, wormholes, all kinds of things. And if humans do have the ability to do that, it's probably been handed down to us from the Greys or something like that, and it's being like used kind of like in hidden government bases to do that kind of thing. But it's not as if I believe, like, if I want to go out there and create like a portal and walk into a different world, that I can do that. I can do it astrally, but physically, no, I don't believe that I can just go and transport myself there. But like vortexes are really powerful. They are definitely real. That is something that you can research yourself, the ley lines in your area, and find where they intersect even in your own yard. You can go and create like an altar on that site and actually see things like manifestations come true for yourself. And that's a real a sovereign kind of creator vibe if you go and intentionally create your reality and use things like astrological alignments, vortexes, ley lines, and things to empower your magic. That's very real. I don't consider myself like a witch, and I don't do that kind of stuff. However, I know that it's very real and that you can absolutely do that. And then, yeah, like the portals thing, I've astrally traveled through portals. I've seen what looks like a wormhole and gone through it, but your human body stays behind when you're astral projecting. Do you want me to share my abduction with you at all?
Yeah, please do. Yeah, please.
I haven't shared that
Please.
yet.
Yeah.
That's something that's pretty, it was pretty shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I can try and share with you for our last little section. Okay,
Sure.
so I did mention before that I had an abduction that I considered not so positive, and it is
Mhm.
important for people to know that these kinds of things can happen. Like I said, it's not all love and light, and it's important for us to just not trust everybody, right? I learned a big lesson this day when this happened, that you don't just trust anybody that comes along galactically. I mean, like, if aliens are showing up, or beings that you don't recognize are showing up in your home, in your dreams, in anything like that. It's super important for you to have your boundaries, to protect yourself, to say no. And I didn't really have that lesson quite yet, and I was a little bit more naive. And so what happened to me was I was actually what I would call plucked from my very dream, right? So it was happening on a physical level, but it was also happening on a dream level. And so people kind of don't realize that an astral abduction and a physical abduction go hand in hand a lot of the time, because they have ways to keep you asleep. But what you start to have happen inside your mind in the dream is actually being mirrored on the outside, as they are probably like taking you into this ship or whatever's happening. So for me, what happened, I'll just describe, all I can describe is what happened on my end, and you can kind of get an idea of maybe what was going on in the room around me or whatever was happening. So I was having this dream where I was, it was a harmless dream. I was visiting a friend and I was in their house. And in the dream, two people entered in that didn't belong. It was a man and a woman, and they had a very dark energy. And they started talking about seances and trying to connect with like the underworld or the dead or something. And I remember just ignoring them in the dream, thinking like, all right, whatever, like let everybody, have their space in a way. Like I kind of just thought, okay, they're doing their thing. I'll just respect that, but I'm going to continue on with what I was doing in the dream. But they actually came up to me, and the man did almost like what I would call like a karate chop with his hand right where my neck connects to my shoulder. And he hit like a spot that I just went like under. Like I literally was there, and then it was just blackness and I was gone. And when I came to, I was in this confined space, and I really feel like I know that it was a confined space that was moving. It felt like a vehicle of some kind. I was like stuffed into this little room. And I just remember like waking up in this confined space and being like, they've taken me. Like, I know that something's happened. I've been taken from where I was supposed to be. And so I started calling out to my guides, is my way of like asking for help. And I started asking my guides, like, what do I do? How do I get out of here? What's going on? And one of my guides came through. And normally my guides feel very peaceful, very calm. And they also felt very on alert, very agitated. And my one guide said, get off at the ship. And I was like, what does that mean? And I was like, and I faded to black again. So I kept like passing out. And so all of a sudden, I find myself on the shore of a beach. So I wake up and I'm standing and I'm feeling out of sorts, and I'm standing on the shore of a beach, and there's water to one side and there's a beach, and then there's a sidewalk, and all along the sidewalk are these houses. And so I feel like I need to, like I've gotten away and I need to continue moving. And I can all of a sudden see like behind me, what I would call searchlights are like now scanning the beach and getting closer and closer to me. And so I make my way over to the sidewalk and I start walking really, really fast. And the place that I'm in, this world that I'm in, feels so creepy, so eerie, not like Earth at all. And it felt like hellish. Like, and I don't, even know how much, like, I don't believe in hell, yet I do believe that there are darker dimensions. So to me, it felt like what I would call the underworld, like where the darkest of the dark beings live. And so it was like, it just very palpable in the air around me, the feeling of like evil, the chills, like very creepy. And so as I'm walking along the sidewalk and these searchlights are coming, I start going faster and faster. I'm trying to get away. I know that they're trying to like get me back on this ship. And my guide had said, get off, get out of the ship. And so I'm looking at the houses as I pass them by, and there's one particular house with a big window, and the being staring back at me is so evil looking. It looks like a werewolf or like some kind of wolf, with like its skin kind of like deteriorating off of its face, and now it's just like a bone mouth and snout, and it's like leering at me, like leaning forward, and there's like foam dripping from its mouth, like it wants to eat me. And I see it staring at me and like watching me walk by, and I was like, oh shit, like, okay, then I'm just not going to look at anything. I'm just going to look at my feet because I'm clearly somewhere bad, and I'm just going to keep going faster and faster. I get to the end of the sidewalk and there's nowhere to go. Like that beach is actually, turns out, was an island, and there's just water all the way around. So there's nowhere to go. The lights behind me get closer, and all of a sudden I go out again, blacked out again. The next time I wake up, I'm in a ship, and this is so clear. Like I remember it to this day, the feeling of it, the look of it. Right beside me is this little circular window, like you would see on a plane, but more of like a perfect circle. And it's right here. And I'm stuffed into this small space again with this window. And I feel so drugged at this point now, like beyond what I felt when I was walking. Like I feel now like I can barely open my eyes. And I open my eyes up and I look at the window, and I see that there's like raindrops on the outside, like water streaming, so that we're moving forwards. And then I feel this surge, like when someone takes off, like the G-force of it pushes me back into my seat. And I feel this surge feeling like being pushed back. And again, very frustratingly, I black out again. And then I come to, and I'm feeling the feeling of an elevator when it's going straight down, like you're landing. So it was like the landing that was happening. And the ship was landing, and I don't know where we were, but I was very nervous about what they were going to do with me now that we were wherever they were trying to get to. And so the feeling of that straight going down in the ship, and then the next thing I know, again, just keep blacking out in between all of this. The next thing I know, I'm standing in my bedroom, and there's no one there, and I'm standing in my bedroom, but it's just not quite right. Like it's my bedroom, kind of, but the bedding is wrong. The curtains are the wrong color. Everything's a little bit different. And I just know that I've been dropped off in like the wrong timeline. Like if we have, because we have these parallel timelines in these lifetimes where we are living out, each choice that we make creates a new life. And I've been dropped off. Maybe they were trying to drop me off at my home, but they've dropped me off in like the wrong space, basically. And so as soon as I realized this, I try to get out of that house. And so I start like opening doors to try to get out of this house. And I open a door that leads to almost like just blackness. And I fall down through this blackness, and I land on my back. And as I'm laying there, I'm completely paralyzed. I can barely keep my eyes open. I feel like helpless. And then again, fade to black. And then I wake up for real, this time in my own bed. And I wake up in my bed with like a start. There's like a really loud noise, actually. It sounds like somebody just like the whole universe just clapped. And then I wake up and I'm in my own bed, and I'm like touching myself, making sure I'm like complete and whole. And am I really here? I'm looking around the room. This time everything is where it should be. But when I try to stand up, I'm so like drugged that I can barely stand. Like it's like the world's worst hangover. And I like get into the bathroom. I feel like I need to look at myself in the mirror and make sure it's me. And I'm holding onto the side of the sink, and my legs are just like, I don't know if you've ever like had anything like that happen to you, where you've been drugged, without your consent, but your legs are like noodles. Like I couldn't even stand. And it was hours of this, like hours of feeling like I could barely move. Like I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. And as that faded, the fear, the feeling that I had been violated, that I'd been taken from my home, that I had been taken from my dream, and that what was all of that even for? Like being taken to the underworld, put back in a ship, dropped off in the wrong life, taken back, and finally dropped off where I was supposed to be. And I checked my body for any marks, like that something's violated you, something's happened, but I didn't know what that was about. And like I said, other times where I've had abductions, I receive information afterwards about why, what was the purpose. And it can be kind of like, even if it's scary, there can be like a light or a positive reason, some kind of program you're a part of. This, there was nothing. Nobody was giving me information afterwards. When I was asking my guides what happened, you know, they weren't able to give me any clarification at all, which never happens. It's like no one knew why that happened. And that's why I said it kind of felt like a mistake somehow. Nothing that extreme has happened to me since. I've definitely been abducted since, but I've been, even when it's been a little weird, I've always been given afterwards why. And then I'm like, you can come to terms with it and you can kind of work with that. But having no idea why that happened, it's hard to like have any kind of closure around it. But that's all just to say, like, you know, to have like really strong boundaries. Like if people, I mean, I don't really know what I could have done to stop that. So I think sometimes things just happen, but I definitely wasn't at the beginning being on my guard when I felt those weird beings enter into my dream. And now I have a lot more of like, I would call it like a boundary. Like when stuff feels off right away, I'm like, nope, get away from me. Like, don't come near me. And in this case, I wasn't like that. And it led to this whole weird escapade of me feeling like super angry afterwards. I was really, really angry and I was feeling so violated and afraid to go to sleep. And I never once saw, other than that one underworld being, I never saw who took me, which was also like a weird thing. So I'm not sure what all that was, but it was very, very real. And the physical abduction is, you know, if you feel like you literally was so drugged afterwards. But some people can experience just an astral abduction. So there are different levels. That to me was pretty extreme.
Wow. Well, talk about terrifying.
It
Jesus
was.
Christ. Yeah, I'd been terrified.
What an experience. Yeah. Jenny, that was awesome. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you for having me. It was so good to meet both of you.
Yeah,
and maybe
but
some information around that you don't always have on your channel.
that's right. We'll
Yeah.
definitely have you back on again.
Thank you.
Yeah. But to finish up this episode, please let people know where they can find you online.
Absolutely. You can find me on YouTube and on Instagram. It's Starseed Academy for both. And I'd love to, you know, have anybody that's feeling that whole starseed, I don't fit in, don't know what to do with myself, reach out to me and I'd be happy to, you know, help guide them on that journey.
Awesome. We will put links in the description.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, Jenny, thank you again. And please stay with us for 2 more minutes, okay?
Okay.